stand in the center of the room. Do not look at the paintings yet. Feel the air pressure change. You are not entering a gallery, you are stepping inside a pulse. The light is dim, deliberately suppressed, forcing your eyes to dilate, to hunt for form in the shadows. When you finally turn to face the canvases, what greets you is not the warm, hovering radiance of the Rothko you think you know. Gone are the floating clouds of ecstatic yellow and vibrant orange that defined his work in the early 50s. Instead, you are confronted by heavy, brooding pillars of maroon, black, and the color of dried blood. These are the Seagram Murals. To call them paintings feels inadequate. They function more like architectural interventions. Rothko did not paint these to be looked at. He painted them to be lived in. Notice the verticality. Unlike his traditional horizontal stacks of color, which suggest a landscape or a horizon line, these forms stand upright, rigid and imposing. They resemble pillars, or perhaps more unsettlingly, doorways that have been sealed shut. There is a specific claustrophobia here, a sensation of being surrounded by windows that offer no view, doors that open onto nothing but darkness. Rothko achieved this suffocating effect through an obsessive layering of pigment. If you step closer, though the paintings seem to push you back, you can see the frantic energy of the brushstrokes at the edges. The dark maroons bleed into the blacks, creating a vibrating boundary that refuses to settle. It is a visual hum, a low-frequency drone that resonates in the chest. This was calculated. Rothko was famously secretive about his methods, but we know he mixed egg and glue into his paints to create a quick-drying medium that allowed him to layer rapidly, building up a surface that absorbs light rather than reflecting it. These canvases drink the illumination of the room, hoarding it, leaving the viewer in a twilight of the artist's making. The inspiration for this oppressive atmosphere was specific and surprising. Rothko had recently visited Florence, where he stood in Michelangelo's vestibule for the Laurentian Library. He was captivated not by its beauty, but by its hostility. He noted how Michelangelo had designed the space with blind windows and walls that seemed to encroach upon the viewer, creating a sense of entrapment. Rothko wanted to transpose that feeling of spiritual and physical confinement into abstract expressionism. He wanted the viewer to feel the weight of the walls closing in. When you stand before the Seagram Murals, you are not meant to feel soothed. You are meant to feel small. The windows in the paintings are barred, the doors are bricked up. It is a trap constructed of oil and tempera, designed to hold you in a state of suspended tension. This is the visual language of the Seagram Murals, a somber refusal of the outside world, a deliberate turning away from the light. It is a profound paradox, art that invites you in, only to reveal that there is no escape. This was the trap Rothko set, but as we will see, the intended victims were not the museum-goers of today, but a very specific, very wealthy group of diners in 1958. To understand why these paintings scream with such silent fury, we must travel back to 1958, to a New York City drunk on its own ascent. The skyline was piercing the clouds, and at the center of this vertical ambition rose the Seagram Building on Park Avenue. Designed by Mies van der Rohe and Philip Johnson, it was the ultimate monolith of modernist capitalism, sleek, bronze, and unapologetically elite. Inside this temple of commerce, they planned to build the Four Seasons restaurant, a dining room that would serve as the cafeteria for the masters of the universe. They needed art that matched the ambition of the architecture, art that whispered power. Naturally, they called Markrothko. It was the most prestigious commission in the history of modern art. Rothko was offered $35,000, a staggering sum at the time, equivalent to roughly $300,000 today. For an artist who had spent decades struggling in obscurity, living on the edge of poverty, this should have been the moment of ultimate validation. But Rothko was a man of deep contradictions. He was a declared anarchist and socialist, a man who viewed the accumulation of wealth with deep suspicion, yet he craved the immortality that only high society patronage could provide. He accepted the commission, but with a secret, subversive intent. He didn't want to decorate their restaurant, he wanted to terrorize it. Rothko retreated to his studio, transforming a former gymnasium into a replica of the restaurant's dining room to ensure the scale was perfect. He worked with a feverish intensity, producing the dark, towering forms we just explored. He told friends that he accepted the job as a challenge with the malicious hope of painting something that will ruin the appetite of every son of a bitch who ever eats in that room. He envisioned the murals as a silent judgment, a brooding presence that would unsettle the bankers and brokers as they cut into their stakes. He imagined his red and black pillars looming over them like the writing on the wall at Belshazzar's feast, a portent of doom amidst the luxury. However, the reality of the space eventually crashed into his fantasy. After working on the murals for months, Rothko actually visited the Four Seasons for a meal. The experience was a revelation, but a horrifying one. He saw the pretension, the chatter, the clinking of expensive silverware. He saw the richest bastards in New York parading their wealth, utterly indifferent to the environment around them. In that moment, the devastating truth hit him. His paintings would not be a subversive force, they would be background noise. They would be expensive wallpaper behind the heads of diners who cared more about the wine list than the void. The clash was absolute. It was the collision between art as confrontation and art as decoration. Rothko realized that his work demanded total attention, a surrender of the self, which was impossible in a room designed for social posturing and consumption. To hang his dark spiritual portals in such a place would be an act of prostitution. The silence he had painted into the canvas would be drowned out by the noise of capitalism. So, in an act of staggering artistic integrity, or perhaps supreme arrogance, he slammed the brakes. He called the restaurant, withdrew his work, and returned every cent of the $35,000. He chose to save the paintings by rejecting the world that wanted to buy them. The rejection was complete, but the story of the paintings was far from over. Now homeless, the Seagram Murals sat in Rothko's studio, gathering dust but retaining their power. They had become orphans of his own making, a monument to a gesture of refusal. For years, collectors and museums circled, eager to buy individual pieces. The market value of a Rothko was skyrocketing, and these were his most significant works. But Rothko was adamant they would not be separated. To sell them one by one would be to dismantle the architecture he had built. It would be like selling the bricks of a cathedral as souvenirs. They were a single, unified statement, a chorus that needed to sing together to be heard. Rothko held on to them for nearly a decade, waiting for a space that deserved them. He didn't want a hallway or a lobby, he wanted a sanctuary. In the late 1960s, a solution appeared across the Atlantic. The Tate Gallery in London proposed a dedicated room, a space where the murals could face each other, recreating the immersive, claustrophobic environment Rothko had originally intended, but stripped of the dining tables and the noise. This was the validation he had been seeking. It was a space for contemplation, a secular chapel where the viewer could engage with the tragedy and silence of the work without distraction. The negotiations were detailed and specific. Rothko dictated the lighting, the wall color, and the arrangement. He was crafting his legacy, ensuring that long after he was gone, the experience of the work would remain controlled and pure. But as the plans for the installation finalized, Rothko's own life was spiraling into darkness. His health was failing, his marriage was collapsing, and his depression was deepening into an unshakable abyss. The darkness he had painted into the Seagram Murals was now consuming his reality. The final chapter of this saga is one of the most haunting coincidences in art history. The crate containing the Seagram Murals arrived at the Tate in London on the morning of February 25, 1970. On that very same day, in his New York studio, Mark Rothko was found dead. He had taken his own life, slicing his arms in a final, violent act of despair. The paintings he had protected so fiercely, the works he had rescued from the bastards of New York to find a safe harbor in London, arrived at their destination at the precise moment their creator departed his. Today, when you walk into the Rothko room at the Tate Modern, you are entering a mausoleum. The silence there is heavy, almost theological. The dim light and the maroon pulses feel like a heartbeat slowing down. The rejection of the $3 million commission was not just a financial decision, it was a preservation of the soul. Rothko sacrificed the money to ensure that his art would never be mere decoration. In the end, he won. The murals do not ruin our appetites, they transcend our hunger entirely, feeding a different, deeper part of us that craves meaning in the dark. They stand as a testament to the idea that art is not there to please us, it is there to confront us, even if the artist has to destroy himself to make us look.